In this video series, I'm going to show you how you can make a real e-commerce store with Laravel from start to finish, showing you how I go about the whole process from installation right up until launch. In this first episode, we're going to look at the overall plan of what we're going to be building, get Laravel installed, and set up our migrations, models, and relationships. So let's get stuck in. So here's the mock-up that I have for the design of this site. It's an online store selling t-shirts, just an idea that I had a while ago, and I thought it'd be a nice project to show you guys every step of the way and actually launch it. So instead of me showing you examples, I'm actually showing you code from a real application. For me, with any big project like this, I like to have a plan in place right at the start, and having a visual mock-up like this helps me start to understand the elements I need to build and how everything links together. So this has been created in Adobe XD, and I've put together a few key screens that we'll need. So we've got a home page here with a slideshow, some featured products, and some other elements going off there. We've got a product listing page that simply lists the products in a grid. A product detail page, so we have more product images here, a size selection and color selection, add to basket, etc. We've got a mock-up of the basket and how that will look. And finally, part of the checkout process, which has a slightly different look and feel. So immediately we can start to think about what's required from an application point of view. We can see we've got products, and they sit within different categories. And products have images, they have different size options, different color options. You can see up here there's user authentication, so people can register an account, and we need to track a user's purchases through the basket and the checkout process. So at its core, we can look at all of these things as the basis of our database structure. They're all pieces of data that we need to store, and they relate to each other in different ways. So as a first step, let's install Laravel and get some migrations and models set up for these elements. Now in my local environment, I have Valet set up, which makes local development incredibly easy for things like this. So I can install a fresh Laravel installation in a new directory called dicetease. And then in browser, dicetease.test is set up. Valet just makes that super easy. So let's open this up. Okay, so first let's quickly add our database name to our M file. I set that database up just before I started recording. Now for this site, I want to keep things fairly simple, and at least to begin with, keep things pretty contained to Laravel and Blade. So for user authentication, let's install Breeze. And if you want to know more about Breeze, check out my video in the top corner. So we'll install Laravel Breeze, and there we go. So we've got our basic application set up. Now, if we refer back to our database outline from before, we can start to create migrations and models for every single one of these tables in our database. So let's go PHP artisan make model and create the product model to begin with and use -m. Now -m is just a quick shortcut that will create us both a model and a migration, which is pretty cool. So now let's go through and do this for each of our elements. So we need a category. Products will have images. So I'll create a product image model. We have colors as options, and we also have sizes. Now all of these elements, the image, the color, the size, and the product, they combine to make up variants of the same product. Let's think about it for a second. Say we have a t-shirt design. That t-shirt design is available in 5 colors and 4 different sizes. So you could have a red small, red medium, blue small, etc. Now, each of these is a unique product that we need to track for the purposes of stock levels and in our checkout, etc. So when somebody comes to our shop and adds a small red t-shirt to their basket, they're not going to be adding the root product, so this model here, to their basket. They're actually adding a combination of the product, the color, and the size. So this is an interesting data problem for us to solve. And to solve it, I think we need another table to store those variants, which links everything together into a purchasable product. So I will create a product SKU table. So each one can have a unique SKU code. Next, let's create our basket model. So basket, and we also want a basket item table, which will just track the items someone has in their basket. And finally, let's create an order table that will track orders placed. So now we have all of these created, we can actually go through each one and flesh out the migrations a little bit. So in our database migrations folder, you'll see it's created all of our migrations for us. So let's start with the products table. So now let's refer back to our design. This is a product detail screen. So we can see that a product has a name, it has a description down here, and it belongs to a category, one of these here. And really, I think that's all the common information. Things like the colors, the sizes, even the price would come down to that product SKU table that we just talked about. So nice and easy then. A product just needs a name, which will be a string, and a description, which can be a text field. Now, one more thing that we will need that isn't immediately visible on the design would be a slug to appear in the URLs. So I think that's it for our products table. Let's move on to our categories. Now again, categories I think would be pretty simple. The categories here we can see are pretty much just made up of the category name, and again they will each have a slug. So we can go table, so give it a name and also a slug. And obviously we do need a way to link the products to categories. So let's add a foreign key in here in the products table. And there is a field type that Laravel gives us called foreign ID, which comes in handy, and we'll call it category ID. And if you keep foreign keys in this kind of format with an underscore and then ID, Laravel's models should pick that up automatically in your relationships, which makes things slightly easier. Now, talking of relationships, this is a relationship that we need to set up. So while we're here, let's have a look in our product model. And we want to create that relationship which links these two tables together. So we need a public function, and we will call this category. So it's the category that the product belongs to. So all this function needs to do is return this belongs to, and then we refer to our category class. And this is why I love eloquent relationships so much, because that is so readable. If you think about it, when you're using a product, you will simply be referring to its category, and then you delve deeper and the category says that the product belongs to the category class. Right, let's get back to our migrations. So I think this is probably it for the categories table. So next, let's go to the product images. Now the product images obviously will relate to a product. So again, we need a foreign key for product ID. And really the only other field that we need here is the path to the image. So we can just have a path field, which is a string. Right, let's set up that relationship as well. and we can say that the product image belongs to product class. So potentially there could be some expansions needed for this table, but for now let's leave it as simple as this. What's next? The colors table. So for colors, we need to be able to generate these boxes. Now it makes sense to name them, even though the name's not displayed at this point, we'd probably use it elsewhere in the system. And we probably want to store the hex code as well. So let's create two fields here. Both of them strings, one for a name and one for the hex code. And we'll leave its relationship for a second. Next, we can move on to the sizes. And again, size is fairly simple, although I think in this case, we just need the size itself, which again will be a string. So we can say size. So next we're moving on to this product Skus table. Now each of these individual product variants or product Skus will, as the table name suggests, have a SKU code. And that will be a unique code that we can use internally to identify exactly what product someone's purchased. Now a SKU doesn't necessarily need a name. We can relate it back to the original product, so we can get the product name and the product description. So just here, let's include that link. So we can say foreign ID, product ID. And then we need a couple more foreign IDs relating to the size and the color. Now, obviously this is very much related to our system because we know we're selling clothing, we're selling t-shirts, hoodies and sweatshirts. Every single one of those is going to have a color and every single one of those has a size. So for now, I think this is fine. But if we started selling other types of products in the future, which is a possibility, this may need to change. But we'll think about that later. I think for now, let's stick with this. So these three relationships brings all of those elements together. In fact, what I think would be better here as well is to include a product image relationship. That way, when somebody chooses a combination, we can switch up this image to an image that shows the correct color. That might be pretty cool. Okay, so let's set up these relationships in the models themselves. So this first relationship can stay as it was. Again, it's linking back to the root product. And we want a size relationship, which relates it to the size model. Color. And finally, that product image. And what we will also need in the product model is the reverse of that. This is a one-to-many relationship, so we want to be able to get the Skus, so all of the product Skus that belong to a product. So instead of belongs to, we use has many. So that will return as an array of all of the Skus for the product. And while I'm thinking about it, the category would need that as well, so that it can bring back a list of all products. There we go. Close these down. So that's our product Skus table as it stands. What else might we need on this? I think a stock level. It makes sense to store the stock levels against each SKU. And also, as we mentioned earlier, the price. So that will be a float, and we'll say price. So again, let's refer back to our design quickly. By using the tables we've set up, we'll be able to display the product name, all of the sizes, all of the colors, its price, the description, and we can also display all of the images that relate to the product. So these icons down here are more of a related product type thing, which I think we'll worry about later on. Similarly with the estimated delivery, I think that needs a little bit more thought. So we'll leave those for now and get back to our migrations. So next on the list is baskets. So how will baskets work? So when I tend to create a basket system, I like to have a database table that stores that information and store a reference to that in a cookie in a person's browser. So in order to do that, we'll create a string field called unique ID, which will be the reference that we'll store in a cookie. And it makes sense for the basket to have a user relationship. So we'll use foreign ID again to create that. However, we want guests to be able to add items to their basket, not just users. So it makes sense for this to be nullable. So if a user doesn't have an account yet, we can still create a row in the table for their basket. And then when they log in or create an account later, we can update that reference. So again, let's refer back to our design. And at the root level of a basket, there's not a huge amount more that we'll need to store. Now, obviously there are shipping costs involved. So maybe it makes sense for us to have a shipping field in there to store that value. And we probably want to give that a default. So let's give that a default of 0 for now. And the only other thing really is the discount code. Now I think that's a feature that we can concentrate on down the line. So now we'll just leave it like this. So next we have the basket items. So obviously this needs a relationship with a foreign key to the basket table. And what we're doing here is linking a product SKU to a basket, also saving the quantity. So we'll create an integer here called quantity. Now my thought here is not to store any prices in this table, because in theory we can use Eloquent to drill down and fetch the price for each product in our basket. Whether that's the most efficient way to do this, I don't know, but that's the plan. We'll give it a go in a future episode, and if we think it needs it, we'll come back and add prices to these tables. So I think that will do for now. Let's go and create these relationships. So we have our basket item here. Just steal this. So we say this belongs to a basket. And the opposite of that, we want a has many to say, I want to get the items from the basket item model. We also related the basket table to a user. So we can say that a basket belongs to a user. Even though that is an optional relationship, the relationship is defined in exactly the same way. So let's go back and finish off with our final migration for the orders table. Now during the checkout process, as the user goes through and they pay for their order, as soon as they give us that intention that they want to pay, we'll convert their basket into an order. So an order really is a copy of their basket, but with some extra information in there. So again, it will be related to a user. So we can say foreign ID, user ID. And actually we are going to need an order items table as well. So we'll create that in a second. Now, where we were talking about leaving prices out of the basket, it makes sense to include them in the orders table. Reason being, when someone's placed an order, those prices are fixed. So if a price ever changes, we don't want a relationship to then ultimately change the total in a previous order. That will just mess up with accounting and statistics and everything else. So in here, we will store how much a user paid for the order in total. And we will also store how much they paid for shipping. And we're also going to want to store the reference to the payment. So my plan is for this project to use Stripe. Stripe will give us a unique ID so we can relate the order back to an individual payment in Stripe. So that will just be a string, and we'll call that payment ID. And it makes sense to also store a timestamp of when the order was paid for. And these two fields we will actually make nullable because we'll be creating a row in this table before a payment has been made. Finally, I think what this table needs is a status field. So we'll create that as a string and call it status. So that's where, when we create the order initially, which will be just before somebody goes to pay, we'll set the status to unpaid. When they pay, we'll set it to paid. Once we dispatch the item, we'll set the order to dispatched. And there could be other statuses in between as well. So now let's go back into our terminal and create that new table that we need. So we'll go make model, order item, -m, and here you can see it's created as our migration again. And what we will do here, we will take the fields that are in the basket item table, bring those across to the order items table, change this to order ID because this relates to an order, not a basket, still relating to a product SKU. We still want a quantity, but just like the orders table, let's store the price in here as well, so we know how much somebody paid for each individual item on the order. So to finish this up, let's go and set these relationships up in our models. Again, just like the baskets table, I can take these and we have a relationship to the order items and the user that placed the order. And then the order item relates back to an order. See, it belongs to the order class. And as far as database migrations and database setup for the initial core of the system, I think we're about there. So to finish up, let's run our migrations. Migrate. So I think that will do for now. In the next episode, we'll have a look at creating some model factories so we can seed the database with some data and have a play to make sure those relationships are all working for us. Hopefully that's given you a good overview of my process when approaching a big project like this, so you can take some of that when creating your own apps. And I hope you've taken some tips away for creating models and migrations as well. Make sure you subscribe to the channel so that you can follow along with this project. And if you like this video, give me a thumbs up down below, and I will see you next time.